Andrew Murphy is an Executive Director of Operations of John Lewis and Partnership, and thank you for joining us here today.
You're welcome.
So to begin with, I have an inevitable question about change. And since joining in 1992, you've obviously seen a massive amount of change in the retail space, from bricks to clicks. Do you think the next 15 years or so, the future of retail is going to see the same amount of change moving forward as we have in the last 15 years?
I suspect it will see at least as much, if not more, change. But I say that for two quite specific reasons. One is, until possibly even this year, most of what we've seen in terms of the rise of the internet, in terms of retail, has been additive rather than displacing of the retail that previously existed. The amount of physical retail that's actually disappeared off the high street and retail parks is really incredibly small, considering how much retail spend and retail activity now takes place on the internet. And I think in future we'll pin it on COVID being the thing that really swung that. But in truth, this year was always looking like a tipping point anyway. So I think most observers' kind of perception of the degree of change is about to accelerate really materially, because we will start to see a move away from what we would refer to as omni-channel, which is running both online and physical, as well as some direct selling and contact centres. And I think it will become more of an online-dominated environment. I think the other two changes that will happen, one is I think there'll be a move to localism. And I think in some ways that will feel like it's almost a reversal of what's happened in the last 10 years, where I think there's been globalization. And I think what will happen is there'll be an almost dumbbell effect, where not only will the middle be squeezed in terms of mid-price and wide range will be an area of pressure, and you'll get more premium and more low price, but I think you'll also get a few very big global brands that will be preeminent, and much more will then be local and relatively discreet. And I think that will play out over the next decade.
Okay, so it's not the end of the luxury market then, or the low price sort of Primarks as well.
I don't think so. In fact, I think both those markets, I suspect, will endure and thrive despite a hiccup in the short term. I think the area not to be is the mid-market, and particularly if you're mid-market and don't have a differentiated proposition.
Jeff, I think you've got your question.
Absolutely. Andrew, it's really good to see you.
Nice to see you, Jeff.
Yeah. My question is really about the subject of shopping as an experience. And we both know that John Lewis has invested substantially in the changing concept that the retail of the future might be just as much about experiences and the services needed to deliver them than it is about the purchase of goods. I mean, in terms of scale, margin, and volume, all things that you'll be familiar with, can an experientially based model really deliver the rebuild of profit to an industry where we've seen it cut to the bone in recent years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the primary question, to be honest, is it possible for retailers to create an experience that can attract the volume of customers that you would need before you got into the price of that's being paid for a product or an experience or at the door? Can we actually persuade people, particularly now post-COVID? And that's got to be a really seriously considered question, because it's not clear to me that can be achieved on a national basis. By which I mean, it's clear to me that a Harrods and a Selfridges can provide that degree of experience and exclusivity that on a one or two sites per country basis is big enough to drive the volume necessary. It's not at all clear to me that you can do that even in otherwise large and prosperous cities like Manchester and Glasgow. It's just not clear to me that can happen. Predicting how consumer will feel beyond COVID is obviously a really fraught thing to do. But I would say that generally retailers are going to have to charge for things that they have previously not charged for, because the economics of the bit they used to charge for, which is the distribution of the product, those economics are cut to the bone. And so it becomes a really simple and clarifying question is, if you can't charge sufficient margin for the sale and distribution of the goods, you're either out of business or you found a way to charge for something else, whether that's services, whether it's something that happens pre-sale in the shop, which is effectively what Selfridges and Harrods would have you do, which is pay more because as you're shopping, you're experiencing this unique global quality experience, or whether it's something that you're paying for after sale, which is more about the guarantee of long-term satisfaction and utility that you're going to get from the product, which is maybe more the John Lewis position.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That's a really, really great answer, I think, in the circumstances.
So now, as we turn to the immediate future in terms of the physical reopening, I'm certain that a massive amount of planning has been going on practically behind the scenes, out of sight. Could you give us an overview of what's been sort of going on at John Lewis, and what some of the customers might expect this coming June, as they do start to revisit the department stores and we sort of enter this new age of the new normal?
Yeah. Well, it's fair to say the word unprecedented is thrown about far too much in modern life, but this really has been unprecedented. And I guess the first observation I make is organisationally, it's been a real roller coaster ride of fresh priorities and information literally every single day, from government, from our employees, from customers, to try and pull together and be consolidated into our understanding of what is permissible, what is practical, and what will be welcomed. And I think that's the right framework for thinking about it. So the government tell you what's permissible, you as a retailer figure out what is and how to make that practical, but then you've also got to try and evaluate to what degree is this something that the customer will enjoy and want to experience, or frankly even put up with. So we've got really tangible things like the 2-meter social distancing rule, and the recognition that will have an impact on capacity in our stores, and therefore queuing and queue control. That sort of thing you can work through quite easily. It's much more difficult to maybe strike a position on things like PPE. You can default to every man for himself, and the individual should judge what degree of PPE they wear. But at the same time, you know that on things like masks, if we don't achieve a critical mass of people wearing masks, the value of wearing masks is pretty much nil. And so we've been working our way through all of these. And in the end, where we've got to is to try and strike a position that keeps the responsibility firmly in the customer's hands to decide, do I want to come out of my house to shop? Do I want to shop at John Lewis? When I get to the door of John Lewis, do I understand what's going to happen inside the shop? And so all our energy is on making the proposition at the front door as clear as it can possibly be for customers, so they can make an informed decision, rather than, if you like, swinging the needle to the maximum level of protectionist approach, putting everybody in masks, enforcing customers to wear masks, covering the place with kind of antiseptic. We could do that, but what it does is it effectively forces a position on every customer that seems to take away their discretion, and also implies that we bear all the responsibility for their safety, where in fact that can never be true. We can't force a customer to wash their hands, and therefore we're not going to force customers to wear masks. So when you come into our shops, essentially it will be a much more managed process. There will be our partners really every step of the way acting as custodians of the process, providing information, making sure that customers are informed about our expectation and what we've tried to put in place to manage their experience and safety. There will be social distancing, as you'd expect. Many of our partners will be wearing masks. If the 2-meter social distance can't be maintained at any pinch points, then masks will be compulsory. We'll have returns drop-off points, so the return process for goods won't be as much of an interaction with a human being as it's been before. And we'll have hand sanitizer, which we're asking everybody to use as they come into the shop. We won't have fitting rooms, and we'll be asking customers to minimise their contact with the product as much as is reasonable. But maybe the final thing and most important thing to say is it's all a voyage of discovery, and we're pretty certain that our day one position won't survive more than 5 days before we've decided that it can be and needs to be improved and changed in response to customer and partner feedback.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to returning to the store and doing some shopping after this long bout of being at home and not doing anything, just shopping online. Jeff?
Yeah, basically, I mean, as you and I both know, Andrew, I mean, the business is structured as a partnership, and those who work in it are the ultimate owners. And that's been one of our core strengths over the years, in terms of the extraordinary effort and commitment it has delivered through generations. Do you believe that our co-owned structure will continue to be a benefit going forward? I say "our" because my heart is always with the partnership, even though I've left. So I guess I'm always going to speak as if it's my business.
So, I mean, obviously, you might expect me to be somewhat biased on this, but I think I'm certain it will be a strength, and I'm certain it'll be a strength, not really because of any of the slightly arcane structuring and vision of the John Lewis partnership, but more because I think there's a slightly democratizing effect for big businesses of what's just happened to the world with COVID. It's reminded us in multiple ways that society and businesses rely on the human beings that comprise them, and that although we shorthand the corporate tag, whether that's John Lewis Partnership, whether that's Bank of England, whether that's British Airways, these are entities that exist and operate only with the collaboration and goodwill of two groups of people, their employees and their customers. And because the partnership as a co-ownership is ultimately about perpetuating an employment model which values human labour and respects it in terms of behaviour and treatment as well as financially, I can't see how that's anything other than advanced and more important in the middle of 2020 than it was even six months ago. And certainly Sharon, our new chairman, and the rest of the executive team, my colleagues who lead the partnership, this is very much our focus. We feel the partnership is, and its model is basically the business model of this time. And it's not without its challenges, and historically or now, but I think it's in many ways better set and better prepared for where we are today as a society than many other business models.
That's a fantastic endorsement of the way we've always done business, Andrew, and thank you very much indeed for that. I do appreciate that.
Great. So one last final question. So from the outside looking in, but with the knowledge of the inside, it seems that John Lewis Partnerships has the resources, the talent, and the agility to survive the crisis, to thrive in the new and different age. If you could give one factor which you feel will be crucial to success in the future, what do you think that would be?
I'm going to be boring here because I'll always give the same answer to the just one thing question. And because it's obviously never just one thing, I think the only thing it ever can be is adaptability. I mean, it's a bit of a Darwinian answer, really, but I'd say that again has been accentuated by what's just happened to the world. Is there are definitely some companies and some organizations that are through scale or through how deep their pockets are that are going to come through and survive. But what you're really saying when you reflect on that is that those factors, scale and wealth, give them the ability to adapt, or at least buy them the time to be able to have 2 or 3 goes at something and then figure out which way is true. The mindset that I would advocate for anybody who's running any part of an organization is be humble and recognize you never know as much as you think you do, and you should never be quite as confident as you think you can be, because life has a way of surprising you. And the thing you'll fall back on in those moments is your personal and organizational agility and adaptability. And so if I was, when I'm teaching my kids about how to think about their life, there is no one skill. There is just the resourcefulness that comes from having a flexible and adaptive mindset, having multiple ways to make yourself successful, and having multiple ways to make yourself happy. I think it's always a good yardstick.
Wow, that's a fantastic philosophy. I've always associated agility with innovation, but I've never associated it with a humble mindset. But I like that, the ability to sort of try, but always think that you can improve. So yes, thank you so much for joining us here today, and good luck for these next couple months and the year ahead. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today and finding out about the retail business.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.